bank account that has money in it, or you pledged an interest in a retirement account as security. If you didn't do any of those things, don't do it now, right? That would be increasing your risk when there's a lot of uncertainty. So don't do it now. But if you've already done that, filing the bankruptcy to reorganize your business gives you some leverage with the landlord. So if you're looking at saving your business and you want to reorganize your debt, you can file the bankruptcy. You can try to renegotiate the lease, or you can ultimately reject the lease and move into another facility with a new lease. It's not easy, but that's something you can try to do. If you want to close your business, because bankruptcy is an expensive adventure, and you lose a lot of control, it may be best to try to negotiate with the landlord a way to get around the personal guarantee. Sometimes if you've had a lease that's been in place for a while and may have rent that's below market, if that's the case, the landlord might be willing to let you go, close the doors, surrender the property, and have the landlord relet the premises. That's just on the lease. We haven't talked about loans. If you have loans, that's another creditor you have to deal with. And if it's a secured loan, if you file bankruptcy, the secured creditor is going to run that case, not you, because the secured creditor has a priority interest over everything there is in the bankruptcy. So the idea is to try to, what I would do if I were you now, and you have from here to June, I would evaluate what your revenue sources look like coming in, try to determine what it's going to take to make it through, given the current circumstances. What is the debt you have to pay? And what do you need to get it down to in order to survive? And then try to talk to your creditors and get them to agree to some sort of restructuring, some new deal. Depending upon the creditor and where you are in this process, they're doing these things. They are working things out, because it's better to have a performing loan and a performing lease than it is to have a non-performing and vacancies, and if it's secured, assets on a balance sheet that you can't liquidate. So
what's going on, John? What's going on with the banks though? If I have a mortgage on let's say I don't have a lease, but I have a mortgage on the property. Did the feds give us some relief? They said I think I remember hearing that you didn't have to pay your mortgage for a couple months or something like that.
Yeah, I don't think that's for commercial property. I think that's for FHA loans. So I think what's going to happen is on commercial properties, you have Florida put in a moratorium on foreclosures. So if you try to do a foreclosure, you probably file the case, but it can't go. You can't get possession. There's no auctions, so you can't liquidate properties. And we went through this. I've spoken with a bunch of institutional lending sources that I know, and they're expecting default rates to hit 9% by the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter this year. And just for a frame of reference, 9% is what we had in 2008 when we had the foreclosure crisis. But instead of it being hotspots like Florida, Arizona, New Orleans, this is, as Anita said, this is going to be nationwide. The default rate is going to be, while the rate is going to be the same, the numbers are going to be much larger.
So I guess we could sit here and kind of, make some educated guesses. I mean, the government in large part created, kind of exacerbated this, because even though there was the pandemic, they made the decisions as to who could stay open, who couldn't stay open. And even though childcare centers were considered essential, their business and revenue was directly dependent on whether or not people actually had jobs to pay for childcare. So in essence, they were kind of hit indirectly, severely. Can we anticipate, are we hearing anything in all of your travels? I don't know if Mark, if you're hearing anything, John, Anita, you're kind of knee deep in this. Are we hearing anything that, considering that the government keeps printing money and throwing it out there, the PPP is going to be questionable because now they're kind of second guessing how they laid out all of that money. Obviously, a lot of people didn't get it. Can we anticipate, especially with how important childcare is to restart our economy? Do you think there's going to be something else out there that they're going to be doing, whether it has to do with, the landlords or, maybe additional funding? Can we anticipate anything happening?
I mean, I don't see it. I don't see it coming. Not like that. Whatever assistance is forthcoming is probably going to have more restrictions rather than less restrictions going forward. So it's going to be even harder to get than PPP was. And PPP was easy, but people still didn't get it because it was hard to get. So I don't see free money being splashed around anymore.
Well, Anita, I'm going to go back to you because there was something that I forgot to ask, and that was that as an essential employer, I have employees that may or may not feel comfortable. I ask an employee to come in. They decide that they would rather not be exposed. They're not in the high risk category. They're in their 20s. They're healthy. They tell you no way, and they voluntarily, they stay home. I decide to fire them because I really need people. Am I exposed from a liability standpoint? In terms of insurance, is the employer's liability? Can they claim workers' compensation? I know they can claim unemployment, but can they claim workers' compensation? Or
okay, well,
if got sick, can they claim workers' compensation?
With workers' comp, okay, so there's occupational injury in the workers' comp law. So if your occupation exposes you to a disease that is not an ordinary disease of life, think of maybe asbestos. You're working in a school and the school's filled with asbestos. So that janitor would have an occupational injury. It was not a disease associated with life, and it was due to a unique condition at that premise. It's going to be pretty hard to prove where somebody contracted COVID. So whether it will become an occupational injury or not, first of all, it's going to be state by state. Every state's a little bit different about occupational injury. Washington state just passed a law that COVID would be considered occupational injury for first responders. They explicitly created that law. We're going to see what the other states do, but it's going to be the insurance companies are going to have to adjust the claim and look, but it does require you to be sick. And then it would also pay wages if, again, it is not a disease of ordinary life. That remains to be seen. The first part of that question, though, was about an employee I said that considers the premise an unsafe premise, and you want to bring them back in, and they say no. And to limit that liability, it would be more if you fire them without appropriate measures in place. It could be an OSHA whistleblower complaint. In order to prevent that, and I actually had that happen to me. I had an employee that did not want to come into the premise, expressed that they felt the premise was unsafe. And I not only spoke to them and coached them, I wrote a pretty lengthy letter that we're complying with the CDC. We've got the distancing, we've got the masks, we've got, the premises is clean. And it's my responsibility to determine where people need to work and when. And once I have all of the risk management, mitigation, containment elements in place, I speak to them, I document. It's going to be a very, very difficult and long road for any employee to prevail in any action against the employer as it relates to whistleblower and OSHA. And I think I answered your questions.
So what about employer's liability? I know that it's kind of, it's for, ancillary, like loss of consortium or whatever. If somebody gets sick, do the family members potentially have a claim against the child care center?
Section 2 of the workers' comp would be loss of consortium. Section 2 is also for dual capacity. When an employer has two roles, ROLES. Maybe they're manufacturing a product that injures an employee, and at the same time the employee is working at a plant. So that dual capacity also would be Section 2. What we call third party over Section 2, but any intentional acts, remember, if we're talking about an employee feeling you're putting them in harm's way, if they prevail in that action, they've gone to OSHA, whistleblower, it's an intentional act that's not covered by insurance. In fact, you lose your tort immunity. I don't want to get anybody nervous. I really believe the courts are going to be very hospitable to employers that have CDC measures in place and they care about their employees. I wouldn't be concerned about that. Could there be litigation? Absolutely. Yeah, but largely, I think they're going to fail. And the courts are looking, Florida's looking at it. Florida's very pro-business. Florida's looking at it, as well as other states, limitation on litigation relative to stuff like that, and products liability. They're looking seriously at it for small businesses.
So Mark, is there anything you think that, that you can share with the group that could be helpful in terms of liability, exposures, anything they can do to protect themselves? Is there anything that we've left out that is of concern?
Yeah, I just think that, typical business practices that might be applied to other issues could be applied to how they're going to treat this disease. So having a set of plans and protocols for how the business is going to operate is certainly going to be helpful. For example, a checklist that notifies everyone of not only the CDC measures, but whatever other preventative measures a facility wants to put in place. Posting those, making those known so that there's something always to fall back on. In addition, like I said at the beginning, a liability waiver, though maybe not pleasant to receive from participants or from rather parents or who have kids in a facility, but a liability waiver could help insulate liability down the road if the parent signs off on it and acknowledges that this is a disease that can be contracted here, just like anywhere, but they will hold the facility not liable or not responsible if something happens. And just to piggyback on what Anita said earlier, I understand that Governor DeSantis and other lawmakers are considering either a bill or an executive order that would insulate businesses from any claims where someone says that they contracted the virus on their premises. I don't know if something like that will ultimately pass or whatever, but it is being considered not only in the state of Florida, but also at the federal level as well. I think Mitch McConnell was talking about it just yesterday. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. But in the meantime, document any and all claims, any and all issues. Make sure you have a plan in place and make sure that you follow the child facility handbook to the T. Because that will also give you a level of insulation.
So the other question I have is, we know that not all waivers are alike. Is there a standard waiver that perhaps maybe is available to child, care owners that they can use, that is kind of like we'd call the best practices of waivers?
I'm not aware of one specific waiver. And some of them might need to be tailored depending on the facility and its unique characteristics. But, it's certainly something that can be drafted and can be made available to facilities, to cover those kinds of issues. Okay.
You might be getting a lot of calls, Mark. There's a lot of comments on the chat room. Everybody's looking for some sort of standard waiver where they can maybe edit and add in their own unique components to it. Robin, I don't know if you have any, I haven't been able to look at all of the chats. If you have any additional questions that have come in that you maybe would like to share?
Yes. So let's see, since you asked me, I'll go through this. Someone was asking about nonprofits. So that was, Liska, if you want to unmic yourself, you said, what about nonprofit organizations? And I think you're in a church, so I wasn't sure exactly what your question was. I guess she's not on mic. All right, I'll go to Jenny.
I just unmuted Lieska.
Okay, now you can?
Yes, hi, Lieska.
Oh, hi, Robin. My question is, we heard that there's a lot of helps over there for childcare providers, like the government are offering. And I don't know, in our case, as a nonprofit organization, our school belongs to a church. And for the PPP, we were able to apply, but I don't know others help that we can have access to, because we closed the school March 16 and it's been 2 months and I don't see where we can open. the school again.
So you're saving, did you receive the PPP?
I mean, we applied for it. We didn't receive yet, but we did apply for it.
So I would assume, Mark and John, if you receive the PPP and then you don't open, don't you have to send it back? What's the legal
No,
issue?
but I still paying to my staff. We are working online with the kids. We have been offering the kids Zoom classes, and we pay the salary until today. Today we are paying the staff salary.
So Lisa, what is your specific question?
My question is, if we are not able to open soon, obviously we don't gonna have the funds to keep going with the school closed. So if I'm gonna keep my staff, if we have other option, or just send my staff and apply for unemployment and wait until we can open again. What is your recommendation about that?
So you're talking about closing a nonprofit operation, correct?
If we don't have enough kids to open again.
Right. Okay. So to close the nonprofit, and Mark, maybe you want to address this. Remember, that has a board of directors. What happens when you close a nonprofit organization? Can you just suspend? Can you just say, we're not going to be doing this business right now? You're not going to lose your nonprofit status?
Well, let me add, if it's a 501c3,
right,
you have to deliver your mission. If you don't deliver your mission, you sacrifice your 501c3 status. And if you sacrifice your 501c status, then they can go back and tax you for the year. So if you are a nonprofit and you can't deliver your mission, your board has to evaluate, with advice of counsel, what it can do to either stay in business and deliver the mission in some alternative way, or it's probably going to have to close.
Now, if you're part of a church, then perhaps, and Lisa, this is where I'm sure your church would need to talk to their attorney. If that's just a service that's provided under many other services, maybe that service is just curtailed, but you're still providing your mission. So you're deploying your funds in other areas of the church. But it is, when you close a nonprofit, there's consequences. Does that answer your question?
Well, that helped me a little bit, but I'm not thinking about closing. What I'm thinking is, if I cannot open, let's say next month, how I can keep my staff if I didn't receive the money for the PPP yet. Because we applied, but we didn't receive the money yet.
I think that's probably the key issue for a lot of businesses. They just simply don't have the revenue to keep going. And it's no different than if you were a business. I mean, you were a restaurant, you opened up your doors and you had no customers in regular times. I mean, the government is helping a lot with revenue, and the PPP is one aspect of it. And I know they're trying to do a second round to help people. But at the end of the day, the prediction is 40 to 50% of small business owners are not going to be able to sustain their businesses and are going to go out of business. And it's an unfortunate result. But part of the reason that John is here is that if there's an opportunity, and if you have more specifics, I'm sure you could call him offline, but bottom line is that you've got to figure out how to protect yourself personally. But quite frankly, some of you are just not going to make it. I mean, that's just the fact. We know most small businesses go out of business in their first year because they're undercapitalized. That's just business in healthy times. Now we have a pandemic. So there's going to be a lot more businesses without revenue coming in who are not going to be able to pay the bills and are going to have to close. It's unfortunate, but it's true. John, I have actually another question that came in. I think is very interesting.
Ella, yeah. I just want to interject. The other thing is, Lisa, this is where your church, do they have a line of credit with the bank? Money is cheap, so that you could get a bridge loan until those other funds come in. So this is where you need to run your numbers. What does this really look like for me? And can I really stay open over the next 6 months and make those decisions? So again, you can get bridge loans.
So thank you, Robin.
Thank you,
John or
Robin.
Mark, can you answer this? This is an interesting one. Can I force my employees to take a COVID-19 test or an antibody test and share the results with me? I know we have HIPAA. I know, we have that you have to, have a certain health certificate to come initially work, but, maybe a TB test is part of the standards for, childcare providers, but not necessarily COVID-19. It's new. Can I say to every employee, you're not coming back to work until you take COVID? You either have to have the antibody or you have to test negative. Can I force them to do it?
Well, I think you can force them to take the test. I don't think you can force them to disclose the results.
Yeah, that's similar to what I was going to say. I mean, unless the state has other requirements for childcare facility employees or other types of employees, you can certainly ask them to do it, but I don't know that they need to share the results.
So, and how about this? How about if one of my employees voluntarily shares with me that they're positive? Do I have to let my entire school community know? And if I do I have to disclose who it was just in case little Johnny was in Miss Mary's class and she was the one that was positive?
Ellen, I dealt with this issue and we did some research on it. We have a lawyer on our team, so a lot of my data is coming, from legal research. If somebody tests positive in your premise, from a liability standpoint, risk reduction, you want to notify your employees who might have been in contact with them. You don't disclose who it was, but you say to the person positive for COVID, who have you been around? Who do you have direct contact with? You go to those folks and say you've been in direct contact with somebody with COVID, and you do send them home. And that's the risk mitigation, but you don't reveal who it was.
Okay, but what if I forget who I've been around? I got a lot of people that I come in contact with on a daily basis. I leave out a few and it turns out the person that I forgot about now has it. I mean, and I find out that you knew about it, but you told 5 people, but you didn't tell me. Am I exposed? Should I just tell everybody?
Ellen, under the DCF handbook guidelines, it does say that a person who is known or suspected of having a communicable disease cannot return without medical authorization, or until the health department or a primary healthcare provider determines the risk of transmission is no longer present. Now, in the handbook, they talk about you can't handle food, you can't come back into the facility, et cetera, for 48 hours. Obviously, with COVID-19, the benchmark has been closer to 2 weeks. But I think that that's probably some guidance you could look to in terms of specifically childcare facilities.
Well, that's if I have a fever, because I know there's companies out there that are doing the kind of the remote, the non-invasive temperature. But these are people who are basically appear to be healthy. And I'm just simply saying, I'm rehiring, we're reopening June 1st. If you want to come back to work, you need to take the test and you need to prove to me you're not sick.
So we have Jeff Hurst. Jeff is on, and Bill Clark from licensing. Mm-hmm. Jeff, can you address this from a licensing perspective? And Bill, I know you're on somewhere. Jeff, can you unmute yourself? Aaron, can you unmute Jeff?
Okay.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm not an attorney or anything, but I will say this. If you follow the guidelines that are in place and adhere to them, they will help you. This is new as far as, someone telling you they have it because maybe they want to work and they don't. But if you suspect and you follow the guidelines, you contact DCF, you contact the health department and bring other people aware in on it. You don't have to make them tell you that, but if they then become under their auspice as that they're looking at them or they get tested and say, well, you can't come back until I get something, a medical release. If you stick to those guidelines, you're going to be better off doing that than creating or trying to come up with all these new things that are out there because they're not under the statutes. They're not in the handbook. So I would adhere to what's already in place for your safety and the safety of the children.
I guess the question is, does the county administrator the governor, whatever, have the opportunity to create new protocols, to protect children. And they probably do. I don't know if in Broward County, if Bertha Henry can say from the licensing standpoint, you now have to require, and I think there was a comment on the chat, which is well taken, that, would we be opening ourselves up to have people take weekly tests? Because, you're not exposed on Monday, but by Friday you're exposed. So I think there's going to be a lot of interesting legal issues and licensing issues that come out of certain, communicable diseases that, we've never addressed before. But,
Right,
as we know, I mean, if
Right.
childcare centers don't open, if schools don't open, most parents are not going to be able to go back to work. So, essential is an understatement when we talk about, liquor stores are one thing in terms of an essential business, but I think childcare providers as a whole are clearly an essential business.
Ellen,
Keep in mind, I just want to just add real quick, keep in mind the southern region, which strictly falls under the Florida statutes, is different than Broward County. So it is possible that you have some different rules going out. So it's important for everyone to, number one, always contact your DCF inspector to make sure that, you're not listening to someone else and you've got the latest rules as it pertains to the region that you belong to. And that's, I want to say, is it possible that they could make some changes? Yes. And those are the things that will direct us. But until that time, I think it's best to stay in contact with your DCF person, your local licensing person, Tallahassee, everybody that you can, and make sure that you're all on the same page.
Ellen, could I mention something to you? I wanted to look up whether you could require an employee before returning to work to get a COVID test. And actually, the EEOC on April 23rd specifically said an employer can require it prior to an employee entering the work premise. Having said that, because it's spotty, some people are asymptomatic, you're going to have novices shooting, foreheads. I have generally not seen taking the temperature as the best risk management strategy. What we did in our firm is we did a pretty big statement to our employees to please not show up to work if you don't feel well. They have to attest to whether they take their own temperatures daily. They attest to the fact that they've taken their temperatures. So there's other things you can do other than, shoot that forehead. Because I think that's spotty. And if you miss it, another thing, and I think we mentioned this, if you have a policy, you must completely adhere to it. You have to have the internal structure to make certain that you're 100% compliant with your own policy. So I think we get into a danger zone when we start taking people's temperature. I am not a big advocate of it, but I think there's other ways to limit risk as well.
Right, because if you have a policy, if somebody proves that you didn't follow it, at least on one day, you actually create more problems for yourself and less problems for yourself.
Right.
Robin, are there any questions coming in on Facebook? Because I know it's been an hour and I know.
You too.
Right, let me ask a question to Jeff since he's going to leave. Jeff, if I close my business, or is there a way that I could suspend my license with DCF, my childcare license? How would that occur? Can you unmute yourself? Oh, Aaron, unmute Jeff, please.
Hi, okay. Yes, you can. We've actually had some people in the southern region all do that. They're just going to say, I'd like to suspend my license. Again, contact your inspector and they can do that. We have people that have done it before all of this for a year because they've had some other issues with land or anything like that. You can, and then when you're ready, of course, you still have to fall under the guidelines, but you can do that. But once you leave the building or you leave the premises, then that's going to be difficult to do because the license is not transferable to a different address. But a person can contact their inspector and say, I'd like to suspend my license.
And what if a person files bankruptcy and they go out of business and then a year later they want to go back in? Is that held against them?
Not for DCF, because we don't get into that for the Southern Re. We don't get into whether you've had bankruptcy a million times. The only issue will be when you decide to get back in, do you meet the requirements for us to give you a license? Now, certainly if somebody one of the attorneys was saying, if you follow the guidelines and do everything, if you've been in good stead, it will make it that much easier and faster for that process to happen. But there is nothing that would prevent DCF from giving you a license in the southern region, whether you've had a bankruptcy or not. It doesn't matter, that's not really our business.
So Anita, could you clarify something? When you said that there was the executive order on April 23rd that said you could require employees to take the test, does that also include advising the person who requested it, the results? Or do we have to take it at face value? In other words,
Oh, no. You could request, you could demand the results because
Okay.
it's part of the ADA and business necessity, and they're determining this is business necessity.
Okay.
Ellen, one thing I want to say that we're also live on YouTube, and those of you on YouTube, you can write in your questions and comments as well. Daniel will be picking those up. Daniel, do we have any questions off of Facebook?
So we are actually live on YouTube. Not sure why we were having a little bit of trouble connecting on Facebook. But,
Daniel, do we have any?
We don't.
Do we have any?
We have Bill Carp trying to raise his hand.
Okay, Bill.
Bill, Bill, go ahead. You're unmuted. Bill. So I think we can get back to you when we can fix your problem. I know Nandi also has a question. She raised her hand. Nandi, if you can unmute yourself.
We have to have a training on muting and unmuting.
No, sorry. I accidentally had my hand up when I meant to go into the chat box. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
Well, ask your question. Nan, do you have a question?
No, I don't. No, I actually did not have a question. I was going to the chat box and my hand accidentally tapped the waves. So I'm sorry. I apologize, everyone.
Okay, great. So are there any other questions? Because we've gone over our hour. Jeff, thank you very much. I know that you have to leave. Are there any other questions? Anybody want to wave their hand? Aaron will scroll through. Let me just see if we've gotten all the questions. I think we're pretty good.
Robin, I can give the email addresses. So if people have specific questions for, Mark, who is part of our early learning practice, or John with respect to bankruptcy, Anita with respect to insurance. Anita's is anita.buyer. Her name is on the screen if you all can see it, at setnorbuyer.com. It's setnorbuyer.com. And then I don't know if one of you can, type it into the chat room. John is J, his first initial, Pollenberg, at beckerlawyers.com. And then Mark is, pardon?
Let's type that in at the end.
Type it in, okay. Mark is M. Stempler at Becker Lawyers, and I'm E. Bogdanoff at Becker Lawyers. We try to make it simple. But we're happy to talk to you, offline if you have a specific question and concern, and if you need some additional guidance, we're happy to provide that to you. I don't have any additional questions on my list, Robin. I don't know if any additional questions have come in, or if there are any last words that our panelists would like to share. Any pearls of wisdom that you might have for people struggling with this. I know we're all struggling, in terms of kind of staying at home. Some of us are homeschooling, other us are, trying to navigate business, staying alive in business. I don't know, Mark, you first. Do you have any pearls of wisdom?
Just stay safe, be careful, and always think about what you can do to protect yourself, not just, health-wise, but from liability issues that may arise. The more steps proactively you take, the better off you might be in the end.
And John, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, so what I tell my clients is take this opportunity to evaluate your business, see how you can make it stronger, how you can you streamline it, make it more efficient, hopefully more profitable once this crisis starts to normalize. so that you can compete on a level that perhaps others can't.
John, I'd like to ask you a question. So what are you seeing, especially, I guess, in Broward County? I don't know what your specific practice area is, as far as small businesses, you know, what percentage do you think are actually going to make it through this? And what's the timeline that they need to look at from a cash perspective, do you think?
All right, so I'm all over the place. So I'm in Florida, I have Michigan, California, I'm everywhere.
Okay.
The cases that I'm looking at and the businesses that I'm looking at are probably end of second quarter. They're going to be making difficult decisions by then. So what is that? That's the end of July, I think. They're going to have to make their decisions. And it doesn't matter whether the economy opens. The issue is here now, and the revenues are going into a summer for a lot of businesses go down, especially in Florida. So right now it's a question of getting your ducks in a row and trying to make that tough decision come early summer.
And so one thing I'd like to leave with, first of all, Adriana told us that the American National Bank in Fort Lauderdale can help with PPP. To call fast, she says 954-267-8150. And what I'd like to leave everybody with is, first of all, Ellen, thank you so much for putting this all together. John, Mark, Anita, thank you very much. If the airline industry in 6 weeks could require to be bailed out by the federal government, if the banks could be required to be bailed out by the federal government, if oil is going to be required to be bailed out by the federal government, we need a bailout in childcare. That being said, if you need to make a hard decision that, you know what, I am not going to throw my life's assets into floating a business that I cannot sustain at this point in time and work through it till it becomes profitable again, just make smart decisions and don't let your emotions get in it. As women in business, we tend to put our emotions first. So just make really good choices for yourself moving forward. So I hope to see everybody next week. Tomorrow, by the way, we have Step Up. Now, there is a lot of opportunity right now as well. The other side of this is tremendous opportunity. Step Up can take you to kindergarten, first, second grade, especially if you have school readiness dollars. I really encourage you to get on the call tomorrow and have a conversation with them. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and everybody stay safe. Ellen, thank you again very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.